In today's video, I want to tell you guys the story of how I actually ended up in Canada and why the pandemic might have been one of the best things that ever happened to me. So if you're new to my channel, my name is Caitlin and I've been living in Banff National Park for almost 2 years now. I came over here in September of 2021 with my partner on a working holiday visa. Since moving here, I've had this YouTube channel as a way to help other people come and try and do the same thing, to show our friends and family what we're doing and keep them updated, and as a way to collect memories for us, right? So this platform has been amazing and it's something I've shared so much on, but in the whole time that I've been here, I don't think I have ever actually shared the real reason that we came here and, how we ended up where we are today. It is a bit of a stormy summer day today, so I have my cup of tea and I thought I would come on here and we could have a chat about that. So I think one of the more interesting things to note is that I was never planning to do a working holiday. I never had any aspiration to move overseas. As far as I knew, it was never on the cards for me. The reason I know this, and I think one of those important moments in my life that I will never forget, was back in 2018. That was when I went to Europe for the first time by myself on like a 2.5 month solo trip. And there was this one point when I was traveling through Scotland. It was school break in the UK and I was on this tour of the Highlands, and it was a small group tour, and I was on there and almost every other person on the bus was a school teacher. Now, if you don't know this about me, I am also a school teacher. I was actually training in my degree back then, but I am a qualified elementary primary school teacher now. And I love working with kids. So I really bonded with these people. I loved meeting them. I loved hearing about how different things were in the UK compared to Australia. But yeah, some of these people were Australians who had come to London and were working from there. At the time, I didn't really get it. I remember meeting these people and I thought they were so cool, but I didn't understand why they weren't just traveling, right? I didn't see the point in uprooting your life to move somewhere else when you could just travel it like I was and not have to go to work and not have any responsibilities aside from, just keeping yourself safe and seeing what you wanted to see. So for me, I just didn't really get it. I was, all props to them, and I thought it was amazing that they were seeing so much of Europe. But I felt like I was seeing just as much. Obviously, that's still stuck with me to this day. How many years has it been? 2023. It's been like 5 years. And I still remember those people and the conversations and thinking that, why would you do that? Not in a judgmental way, but it just wasn't for me then. But then if we flash forward to 2019, that was the year I decided I wanted to go and work at a summer camp in the States. So I had always seen summer camps online, those kids shows on Nickelodeon or whatever, and I wanted to do it so bad. So I grew up absolutely adoring the movie The Parent Trap. I even think to this day it's still one of my favorite movies, and I wanted to go experience it. And obviously I was too old to do it as a kid, so going as a camp counselor was my next best option. So I went through CCUSA. And in December of 2019, I landed a job with a summer camp in Maine. And I was so excited for it. So I was meant to go and work the summer of 2020. At the same time, to make the most of it, I was planning on coming to Canada with a friend first. So one of my childhood friends from back home, Maddie, and I were gonna come in, I think, April of 2020, do a couple weeks traveling through Canada and the Rockies and Banff. And then we were flying down to LA. I was doing a huge Kentucky from LA to New York, like 30 days or something like that. And then I was going to work at camp for a couple months, and then I was going to do another month travel after camp. So that was my big plan for 2020. I had like 5 months of travel locked in. I had paid for it all. I had booked it all, and I was ready to go. Now, obviously, March of 2020 is when the whole world came crashing down. So just a few weeks before I was scheduled to go on all of my trips and come and work in the States, it all got cancelled. And I remember feeling like that was the worst thing that ever could have happened to me at the time. I remember I had so much anxiety. I was having like panic attacks. It was just horrible because I was so upset. I lost so much money as well, and there was so much uncertainty. I didn't know if I was still going to be able to go to camp because I had that job, or, you know, it was a weird time, right? But then it got to the point Australia just closed its borders hard and fast, and I was stuck there. So that was a really rough time, I think, for everyone, you know, in different ways. But I remember looking back on it, and it was just felt like the end of the world. While I was going through all of that, and we all were, I had someone that I knew from home who was living in Banff. Now, I didn't know her super well or super personally, but I was just watching her stuff online for so long. Not intentionally, it was just there. And it kind of planted the seed for me, you know, because I couldn't go. My trip to Banff got cancelled, my trip to the States got cancelled, but she was still there and she was still living her life, and things were so much less harsh than they were in Australia. So if you're not from Australia, things during COVID was very, very restricted. Like living in Melbourne, I think it was one of the most locked down cities in the entire world. We had a curfew, we couldn't even go shopping with multiple people, I couldn't even go to work most of the time. Like I had to do everything online. It was just a crazy time. And because of that, I was just itching to get out and to go see something. You know, I had this huge trip booked, and back in that stage of my life, I kind of was going on roughly like a trip a year. And that was what I needed to stay sane and to feel like I was doing stuff, and that got taken away. So I just felt so unsettled. I felt so like stir crazy, and I needed to get out. And watching my friend online planted the seed for me that I thought maybe we could go do that as well. You know, it was too hard to travel. It was too risky. You know, if a country chose to close its borders again, we would be sent home, and that alone was a very scary thought. So traveling wasn't really a safe option, but moving overseas was still a possibility. And by this point, I hadn't considered it, but it felt like my only option to get out. So there was one day I turned around and asked Tristan, I said, would you move? Like if I wanted to move to Canada, would you come? And he said no. He said, absolutely not. There's no way I want to do that. You know, in Tristan and I's relationship, I am much more of the traveler. I love traveling. Wherever I go, I want to do more. Tristan is more of a vacationer. We sat down and we had this conversation the other day, because once he's settled somewhere, he likes it. You know, he'll rave about it for days and days and days, but he won't necessarily want to go see other things. You know, he's just happy with what he's got, whereas I always want to find more. But yeah, he had no interest. He didn't want to come. But at the same time, he also had a friend he was watching online who was doing a season in Big White, I think. And Tristan was just getting into snowboarding as well, as things were starting to open up in Melbourne. And I think he started falling in love with the sport. I think it just planted the seed for him, right? You know, we were both watching people do it online. We both just tried snowboarding. That was, you know, something that was cool for us. And we were quite intrigued at the idea of having a winter that wasn't an Australian winter, right? Like a winter that was a legitimate white Christmas, you know, what you grow up seeing, somewhere where it actually snowed where you lived. You know, I've always described it as like, you don't get casual snow. Like you drive out of your way to go to a snow resort, a winter resort in Melbourne, but we don't get snow, not really, not ever. So living here just seemed like such kind of a magical opportunity. And somehow, at some point, Tristan came around to the idea, and our plan was to only ever come for 6 months. So it was for us to come and do a winter in Canada, and then Tristan go home and me go to the States to do my job that I had lined up. And that's all we planned for. We started working with CCUSA and the Working Holiday Club to get both my camp visa and our working holiday visas sorted. But at the time we were doing all this, it was still really COVID heavy. In saying that, if you don't know much about how the visa process works in Canada, it's a really weird system. So basically you apply to go into a pool of applicants. So you basically say, hey, I want to do a working holiday visa. Here's my name. You go into a pool with everyone else from your country. At some point, whenever they choose to, Canada then invite you to apply. From there, you actually can submit your application, and then you have to, do your application, your biometrics, which is like fingerprints and face scans and stuff. And then you have to just wait to get a point of entry letter. So that's the whole process. But because we were coming during COVID, you couldn't come without a job, which you can now. So we had to have a job lined up before we could even come here, before we could even apply for a visa. So how it worked back then is the Working Holiday helped us get jobs. We got jobs lined up at Sunshine Village. We got a job offer letter and we submitted that as our application to go into the pool. In like 1 to 2 days, they responded to us and they said, yep, cool, we can see you're needed over there. Here's your application. So we filled in our application, and then the next step was doing our biometrics. Now, Australia and Melbourne specifically was still going through a really weird phase of lockdown, not lockdown, lockdown. Like, it was so all over the place. And we had our biometrics appointment booked, and then we went back into lockdown. So that wasn't considered a mandatory service or a necessary service. So our whole process got put on hold. We had no idea how long the wait was gonna be. I think in the end it was maybe just like a couple of weeks, but we ended up having to wait for that, which delayed everything. And then we finally got to this place, got our application submitted, and then we had to just wait. I think it took maybe like 10 weeks or something in the end, from like start to finish. 3 months maybe by the time from when we like started looking for jobs, when we got our point of entry letters. Tristan and I's visas ended up coming through at very different times. So we submitted everything together, we did every step together, but my visa came through before his did by about somewhere between 5 to 7 days from memory. And if you are in this process, we were waking up every single day checking our phones to see if we'd gotten approved. Like, that is how desperately we wanted this and how desperate we were to go. So every day we were waking up and checking, and I got mine and it was the best thing, but Tristan's didn't come through. And I think at that point we'd already booked our flights. Like, we were pretty hopeful things were gonna come through in time. But I think I got my visa just over a week before we were meant to leave. And it was only a couple days before the Tristan's actually came through. Like, it was at the point where we were panicking, looking for any other option. Our plan was for him just to come on a visitor visa and then, flagpole around a land border when we got his through. Luckily it came through in time, but it was such a stressful time trying to get it all sorted. And my friend is moving to Canada now, and her friend just went through the same thing, and their visas came through at very different times. So heads up if you're ever going to go through that process. But yeah, we ended up coming over here in September. Things were still kind of COVID-y when we first moved, but we didn't really have any plans either. Like, it was only ever meant to be 6 months, and then it turned into a year, and then it turned into 2 years, and then it was, we'll do 2 years, then go to Japan on the way home and do a season there. And now we're in the process of trying to get another 2-year visa because we just love it and we don't want to leave. But I think it's so interesting looking back, because I never thought I would end up here. I never thought I would want to live so far from my family or so far from home, and at times it sucks. Like, there's times you just feel so guilty that you're not there, and that, home is just so far away. But at the same time, we are trying to do as much as we can in our lives, and it's not worth staying in one place just for those, few moments where you wish you were there. So we absolutely adore it here. Like, I cannot express how much I love it, and you guys probably know that because you're here on my channel and maybe you're looking at doing the same thing. But yeah, let me know, like, is Is this something that you are interested in? Is that why you're here watching this video? Or is it something that, you know, you don't think you'll ever do and you're not interested, or you don't feel capable of doing it? Let me know, because it's really interesting even to see how we feel now and how we'll feel in a few years' time. But that is all from me. It is a little story of how one of the worst things in the world turned into, you know, one of the best changes of path in my life. And that is how we ended up here and why. You know, it wasn't something we always planned. So if you're with me still, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and, you know, come and chat with me in the comments. But otherwise, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.